If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. People, what was the scariest thing you saw that you thought was paranormal, but was actually much scarier when you found out what really caused it? What makes it scarier is that I still have no idea what happened. This is the only weird or paranormal thing that has ever happened to me. I was 11 and I recently moved to another city with my family due to my father being in my country's army. We were staying there for a year and thankfully the army gave us a decent house in a complex built for officials with families. Each house had their own large backyard and was separated from other houses by 12 feet concrete walls. One Sunday my family went to buy some stuff at the supermarket. My older sister went with them and my little one was still a baby, so I was going to be alone for a couple of hours. I was okay just playing with my dog, but I remembered that I needed to get my black socks for my school's Monday uniform that resembled a suit and tie. I went to the backyard to get them since they were hanging to dry. At this point I was getting bored of waiting for my socks and I say out loud, "I'm really bored," only to almost immediately hear a young voice closely say, "Then let's play." The voice was clear but not loud. It didn't feel like it came from in front of me or any of my sides, it was just there. I turned around to see my normally hyperactive golden retriever sitting quietly and staring at me. I look around very fast trying to find the source of the voice, but the house to the right was empty and separated by the concrete wall. The house to the left was over 50 feet away and behind the wall, and behind my house there was the long wall with nothing but a steep hill and a house at the bottom behind it. I ran for dear life and hid in my parents' bedroom under the covers and turned the TV on at max volume until they arrived. I explained to them what happened and they had to calm me down for the rest of the day. I have no idea what was that, and to this day I still cannot put my finger on it. I knew the kids on the house to the left, and it wasn't any of their voices. The house to the right didn't have any kids, as I learned later, and there's no way some kid climbed a hill, then a 12-feet wall covered in sharp glass at the top just to say that. There was one time when I was younger that I was home alone in mine and my mother's old townhouse. I'd been downstairs in the living room and suddenly felt uncomfortable being down there alone, so I decided to go to my room. I get about halfway up the stairs when I feel this horrible sense of dread and panic, and I look back and see this complete silhouette of a man, complete from head to toe, standing in the corner at the bottom of the steps. I could feel him looking at me even though there were no eyes. I ran up the stairs and locked myself in my room until my mother got home. Wasn't until years later that I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which explained that happening and a lot of other things I was going through, seeing/hearing. I've gotten more used to the things I've seen and heard over the years, and the medication helps immensely. But I remember that moment so clearly because it scared me so deeply. I'll never forget it. Didn't think this was paranormal, but definitely thought it was creepy and ended up being more than I bargained for. When I was 13, I had a small jewelry box my mom gave me that had cushions for rings. I had 6 rings that I kept in it, nothing of value, think mood rings and silver rings. I was somewhat neurotic as a kid and had spent an afternoon arranging my room, and I'd put the 6 rings in a specific order. I opened the box one day and noticed that 2 of the rings were out of order. I thought someone in my family had moved them because there was zero explanation for this. I asked my family if anyone had touched them, and they all insisted no one had opened the box, but I was convinced someone had to have gone through it. My dad ended up going through our entire house checking for missing stuff, and the only missing things were an old bottle of hydrocodone from the medicine cabinet and some of my mom's gold jewelry from a bathroom drawer. Turns out there had been strings of robberies in the neighborhood where thieves had broken in but only taken prescription drugs and small gold items. None of the robberies had indications that the homes had been broken into, and things like laptops, diamond jewelry and other valuables had been left alone. My family wouldn't have known anything was amiss aside from the fact I was so convinced something was off. Literally my earliest memory. I was 5 years old and playing in a pile of leaves in our backyard. The yard had a brick wall at the far end, on the opposite side was a highway. There were a few openings along the bottom of the wall, for drainage, I guess. So I'm playing in the leaves and suddenly I hear this super weird noise. It was like a high-pitched yowl, and then I see this weird thing emerge from one of those holes at the bottom of the wall. It was moving slowly and really weird, and I froze in the leaf pile and just watched. I distinctively remember whispering to myself, "A monster," because I 100% thought it was a monster. It staggered up to the leaf pile and I realized it was just a cat. I knew what cats were, because my dad loved cats and we had several pets. This cat was enormous and he was also very fluffy. Think Crookshanks from Harry Potter. So I grabbed this cat and dragged him into the house to show my parents. Here's the scarier/sadder part, that I didn't realize until I was older. Apparently someone had thrown the cat against the brick wall from their car. That was the noise I heard. And the reason the cat was walking so weird was because his spine was broken. There was a real monster that day. It just wasn't the cat. Well, I have to read this fast, but I have a lot of memories from when I was young at my grandmother's house, a very old house. I grew up there thinking it was haunted till I was 16. My parents were quick to drop my sister and me off there, free overnight babysitter. Well, I used to sleep in this upstairs room and had a constant memory of a man looking like Jesus Christ the way he is depicted, longer hair, beard, etc. coming out of the ceiling and standing next to me. Placing his hand on my head telling me I'll be okay and go back to sleep. I would close my eyes and drift BK to sleep, and the next morning I would see nothing. Well, this happened almost for 3 years straight when I would go stay the night there, which was a lot. Until one morning I woke up and the ceiling had a permanent face stuck in the ceiling that looked like Jesus, still there to this day, and it scared me so bad. And by this time my mom got a new job and we moved and started staying at home a lot more. I forgot all about this until I was 16. I was reminded when my grandma called my mom to come over. I went with her and my grandma told us my uncle was getting married. I instantly had memories of the room, I don't know why. So I went up and saw the Jesus face still there, and it all came back to me. I never slept in this room, I slept downstairs. My grandma even told me I never slept in that room. It was my uncle's room when he lived there and was an alcoholic when I was younger. Along with my uncle, the Jesus memories, then finally my mind remembered the abuse. It just flooded my mind. I was asleep. She heard loud banging noises coming from upstairs, followed by sounds of washing. The washing noise went on for hours. She thought it was annoying, but completely normal. Upstairs neighbor probably couldn't sleep and decided to move some furniture and deep clean the bathroom. Next day morning she saw her neighbor going downstairs with large black trash bags. Again she told herself it's weird but normal, since her neighbor has been up late cleaning. A few weeks later, she learned that her upstairs neighbor had gotten into a dispute with the roommate, was killed and dismembered. The roommate was caught, and the police discovered large trash bags of body parts. The incident happened that night when she heard the strange noises. My family loves going camping. Well, my aunts/uncles and cousins do. My parents were never the type. One July a good number of years back my aunts and uncles invited me with, I always went cause it was one of the few times I got to see family, to go camping at a pretty popular spot. Each family stayed in a camper, and we all had a big tent set up between us to play cards and eat and so on. One night during a round of cards, I got up to use the bathroom. There was a facility down the paved road that campers in that area would just have to walk to. Had bathrooms, showers, a storm hiding area, etc. If you kept going down the road, there was a beach, lake, volleyball area, little shop and some tables. As I was walking to the bathrooms, I heard a moaning/yelling coming from the direction of the lake. It startled me and I sat there listening. I couldn't bring myself to go to the bathroom cause I was shook, so I went back to the campsite. I notified the family and a few of us went to the lake to investigate. While the screaming got slightly louder the closer we got to the lake, we didn't hear any splashing or signs of someone in the water or near us. The screaming was actually coming from farther down the water or on the other side. However, it was a pretty damn big lake. We sat and listened for a while, and even notified local security for the town we were staying in. The camping office has a direct line, but we never did find out the cause of the screaming. If it was multiple tones/voices, I would just assume it was a group of kids. But it was just one voice. One male-sounding voice. Screaming. Just a loud, seemingly helpless scream. Out towards the water. My grandmother grew up in a bizarre syncretism of folk religion, witchcraft, and bad old-timey medicine. Her childhood was basically the opening credits video for American Horror Story. My great-grandparents were these really austere, vaguely Catholic Romanian immigrants, and my grandma's sister was a witch living with an undiagnosed mental illness that eventually led to her institutionalization. These things all shaped my grandma's views on religion, magic, and science and left her with a deep sense of existential doom. My grandmother grew up, and worked hard to make her own sense of the world with the resources available to her, and eventually started a family of her own. She raised my dad and his siblings with her own brand of esoteric Christianity that I myself was brought up in later. Spiritual forces, angels, and demons were all very real to the people around me in my formative years, and my grandmother was pretty nonchalant about confronting these dangers with ecstatic prayer and low-key exorcisms. So when I was 9 years old and hallmarks of disordered anxiety started to appear, it was diagnosed by my relatives as a spiritual malady. I was often told that the only good fear was the fear of God, but I was mostly afraid of child abductors and the mummy from Stephen Sommers' spellbinding cinematic achievement titled The Mummy. To reorient my fear in a more biblical direction, I was encouraged to listen to a story my dad tells as part of our very own family folklore. My dad was once a nervous 9-year-old just like me. He shared a bed with his little brother, Mike, so one night when he felt a gentle tickling on the back of his neck, he told Mike to cut it out. But Mike was completely fast asleep. My dad laid back down, and when the tickling on the back of his neck resumed, he was so overwhelmed with terror that he lay frozen in his bed until the morning. The next night my dad was exhausted and confused, but also hopeful that it was all a nightmare. But once more, after he was the only one left awake, the tender caressing on his neck started again. It crossed his mind at this point to talk to an adult, but if he did that his parents might think he's crazy, and my grandma was pretty sure mental illness was caused directly by witchcraft. So if anything was going to change, he was going to have to figure it out himself. So on the third night my dad made up his mind to confront this presence. He crawled into his bed and waited. Eventually the tickling on the back of his neck started again. But this time, instead of freezing, he forced himself to spin around and plunge both his hands under his pillow. What he felt underneath was another pair of human hands. He said they felt like the withered, freezing hands of a cadaver, but my dad held on and pulled with all his might. Suddenly the hands yanked from his grasp and disappeared back under his pillow. He said he never saw the hands again after that because the hands were a spiritual manifestation of his fear, and once he found the courage to face it, all the darkness and fear lost its power. It was late at night and I was at my computer on the main level of my townhouse when I heard the sounds of a group of people talking and laughing as they were apparently leaving a party. I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but there are a number of young people in our townhouse complex who have parties on weekends, and I'm familiar with what a group of partiers heading home sounds like. It sounded like they were leaving from my next door neighbor's place, which seems strange as she is a middle-aged woman who doesn't usually hold parties. So I looked out my front window. The road through our community is in the front, hoping to see the group, but there was no one there. That seemed really strange to me. I could still hear them, they were loud, but I couldn't see them. Phantom partygoers. It seemed unlikely they could have gone another way. Behind our townhouses is a field, and there was deep snow on the ground. But that was the only place they could possibly be. To see out back I had to walk up the stairs in my townhouse, which I did, and while going up the stairs I briefly could no longer hear outside. As I got to the top level I could once again hear the sounds of noisy talking and laughing, but as I walked into my bedroom where I have my windows looking out to the back, the noise started to change. And it no longer sounded human. Instead, what I was hearing was the howling of a group of coyotes, loudly, and close to my home. I've heard coyotes many times before, usually some distance away, but never experienced anything like this. I went to the window to open it a crack so I could hear better. Unfortunately, the window had been closed for most of the winter and made a sound when it popped open, and the sound outside immediately stopped. I waited, but there were no more coyote sounds, and no more sounds of partiers. Then I realized it was around 5 a.m., which is hours after most parties break up, at least in my neighborhood. It freaked me out that I'd been so mistaken about what I'd heard. I googled to see if others had similar experiences, and couldn't find a single instance of anyone else reporting something similar. The next day at the gym I was telling my trainer, he's also a friend, when I got to the part where I said I realized the sound wasn't human, he said it was coyotes. He did something similar happen when he was staying overnight at the home of a girlfriend who lives in a rural area. The next day he said he'd slept well except when he woke up in the middle of the night because he'd heard the neighbors partying, and assumed they'd been outside in a hot tub. His girlfriend told him the neighbors don't have a hot tub, and what he'd heard was coyotes. What most scared me about this experience is that, even when I feel certain that my senses are giving me information that I'm interpreting correctly, I may be wrong. 2 of my friends were spending the night at my parents' house. We were all still in high school. My bedroom was a room away from the kitchen, connected by a pantry and hallway. I heard the back door handle jiggle, which meant a cat wanted to go outside. So I went to let it out and get a drink. As I walked into the kitchen I noticed there was no cat there, and the door to the basement was wide open, which we always left closed and locked. So I closed and locked the basement door, a tad unnerved, but it didn't matter. Next to the basement door was a staircase that went upstairs to the second floor. This is relevant later. A couple hours later I hear the fridge door close. I noticed that because I didn't hear it open, but it was in a different room, so that's not too weird. What made it weird was that I didn't hear anyone walk down the stairs, or by my bedroom from the front of the house. The back stairs to the second floor are really loud and creaky, so I would have heard something. Unnerved, I took a knife and went into the kitchen. I see no one in there, but immediately noticed smoke coming up from under the basement door. For some reason the furnace had caught fire inside, and was filling the house with carbon monoxide. Had my friends and I went to sleep, we'd all be dead. Still have no clue what jiggled the doorknob or closed the fridge, but it kept me alive. I thought that my apartment was haunted for the longest time. Common occurrences were taps on the wall behind my head and by the couch, things being moved around or going missing, gates and doors being left wide open, light bulbs would stop working at a regular rate, my animals were always on edge with hissing, yelling, barking and growling, etc. One day, a flash of light went off in this gap in my blinds in my bedroom window. I thought that it was lightning because of the torrential storm at the time. I go to work the next morning and see 2 sunken-in shoe prints at the base of my bedroom window and mud going up the side only under that window. I thought that I had an unrelated peeping Tom. The next night, I chased him off with a broom thinking that it was the end of it. Things quickly escalated. It soon turned out to be my ex-boyfriend from when I was a teenager stalking me. He had started working at my work and sat directly beside me, harassing me constantly. I ended up quitting my job from fear. He followed me everywhere. Would enter my apartment and steal things that only belonged to me, like underwear, clothes, beauty items, etc. I noticed that the busted light bulbs weren't busted. They were simply unscrewed enough to not emit lights. I woke up to heavy breathing one morning when I was alone and knew that he was laying in the space between my bed and wall. I was terrified but casually got up, got dressed and walked out of my bedroom. I then put the leashes on my dogs and cat and hightailed it as fast as I could out of my apartment. I ran for a really long time. I just couldn't stop running. My dogs finally stopped me in protest and I ended up circling back to my house and he was gone. I had called the cops before, but stalker laws are very lax in my state and they said that they couldn't do anything unless he assaulted me or got caught breaking and entering. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked and my dogs would start leaning with all of their weight against the bedroom door or would start sitting on my chest to protect me and would emit low growls. I would call the cops and it would take them hours to get here and he would be long gone. Things continued to escalate and he started tormenting my dogs and husband. Finally, one day after vandalizing my door, he just disappeared. Turns out that he preyed on and groomed a 16-year girl who finally turned 18. They're engaged now. He also raped 3 other ex-girlfriends, which I only found out about after I connected with all of them. He started stalking one of his exes that he raped again about 6 months ago. She went to the cops who refused to do anything. I tried to help her through it the best I could while simultaneously warning his current girlfriend. All of a sudden, I'm blocked by this girl and now I'm getting messages from him again over a year later. Last time, he nearly got me and I only got away because he was distracted by this poor child he's with now. This time, if he stalks me again, I'm scared that he might get me. I haven't seen any signs of him being around yet and it's been a couple weeks since the messages started. I just keep blocking him on all of his new accounts. If he's stalking me now or just getting a cheap thrill out of tormenting me from afar. He seemed to get a thrill out of tormenting my family and I last time. The Lord only knows how long he was around before I noticed him last time. He'll keep doing it because he knows that he'll get away with it. I only pray that this girl that he is with currently can get out of this relationship that they're in before it's too late. I rarely have met truly evil people, but he is absolutely one of them. I really wish that I had just had a ghost. Things would have been a lot easier with Casper. My family and I owned a Rottweiler around the time I was 7 to 8. His name was Bowser. Love you, dude. He would occasionally bark at the closet in my little brother's room. My dad would check it and didn't find anything weird. But we would hear some noises in our walls and sometimes some laughing out of nowhere. It was weird as hell and we all thought the house was haunted. One night Bowser just charged in there barking like crazy, causing my little brother to cry. My parents locked him in his crate but he wouldn't stop barking. After a few hours he finally quieted down before barking again. I remember going to check up on him and my little brother because I was a night owl when I was little, so I didn't sleep much. I find some crazy looking as lady who looked like she was on drugs watching my little brother. I shouted for my mom and dad to come and the woman chased after me shouting, "Shut up, dumb b***h." I ran to the living room because my parents' room was all the way on the other side of the house and this woman was running after me. I panicked when she grabbed my shoulder in such a tight grip and hung onto Bowser's crate while trying to open it as he was barking mad. I finally was able to set him free and he charged at her. She let go of me and tried to get Bowser off of her. I ran to the kitchen to hide. My dad came downstairs and saw what was happening and tackled the crazy lady shouting, "Mom, call the cops." While the crazy lady was shouting, "Let me go. How dare you steal my son?" Then just screamed, scratching, punching, and biting my dad. I was still in the kitchen but could hear what was happening. My mom called the cops and said, "Where's me?" And my dad shouted, "Me." And I ran out the kitchen to my mom while Bowser barked but didn't attack. Police came and she was arrested for home invasion, destruction of property, assault, and I'm sure I'll know why. After they investigated, they found a hole in my little brother's closet and some other holes around the house. They were all connected to the basement, and apparently the crazy lady was a mother who had a miscarriage and thought of my little brother as her son. Yeah, we moved after that. Everyone was fine, but my mom made me and my little brother share a room and would check up on us every hour of the night. And we adopted more dogs. I remember a time when I was about, maybe 10 or 11 at the time of this event. I was the kind of person who was really interested in aliens and the supernatural, despite them giving me nightmares. I don't remember the date, TBH I can't remember much from back then, but I remember that I was with my uncle, and we were pulling out of the driveway to go to the gas station for something. I remember looking straight ahead, and seeing a giant metal object swoop down from the sky. It looked as if it were about to crash, and land right in the middle of the field in front of my house, but at the last second pulled back up and took off between the trees by my house. I remember the top of the object rotating, and there being large completely blacked out windows on the thing. I put it off, and didn't believe what I saw because why the heck would an alien fly that close to the ground? I remember it being on my mind still after I got home. I remember going to my kitchen window, and looking up into the clouds, only to see a long white object pass through, until it disappeared behind the clouds. The last one could have been an airplane, but in the first case I have no idea what I saw. All I know is that thinking about it only makes it more confusing. When I was maybe 7 or 8, I moved into a new house. Everything was normal the first month or two, and then one day a crow started sitting on the fence outside my window. He or she did this every day for like a week, and then things got weird. One day the crow just started flying into my window, over and over and over and over. It would happen a few minutes every day around the same time. At first it was funny, but after a few days/weeks of it I was annoyed and weirded out. At some point I came to the conclusion the crow was possessed and was a demon. So naturally I went to my mom and complained about the demon crow. After a lot of convincing, my mom agreed to be there at the time of said demon crow. Next day rolls around, and would you guess who's back at it? My man, demon crow. My mom just about had a heart attack when it started throwing itself into the window, and if I remember correctly I just slept in her room that night. The next day we had someone come to handle the demon, and it never showed. We never saw it again. It did that every day for like 2 weeks to maybe a month, and just disappeared when we actually got someone for it. For a while I thought it was going to break into my house while I was asleep. You know, something a demon crow would do, 'cause that's how they attack, I guess. In reality it wasn't possessed by a ghost or anything, it probably just had rabies or something. My late grandparents' home was infamously haunted according to my dad, his sisters, and their closest childhood friends. Its most noteworthy occupant was named Chloe, who, according to legend, was a teenage girl who was cut down in her youth by an abusive father figure. Chloe would patrol the upstairs, where the bedrooms were, watching over the children as they slept. Growing up, whenever we slept over at the house, we could hear the stairs creaking as if someone was walking slowly up them, and could see the doors open ever so slightly, as if someone was peering into them. Some of my other family members recall more intense events, like hearing voices calling to them or items floating around the rooms. These phenomenon were observed for years, never growing any less amazing/terrifying. Fast forward to around 10 years ago. My grandparents build a new house for themselves, and leave the old one to their youngest daughter. Some years later, both my grandparents pass away from their own respective organ failures. During this point in time, my aunt began renovating the old house. As she tore apart the upstairs/attic, she found an absolutely revolting amount of black mold, which we not only found had contributed to my grandfather's dementia and early death, but also the mass hallucinations observed by everyone who had ever stayed in the house. When my dad and his cousins were really young, they used to go out into the woods around their acreage a lot. They didn't have any power or running water. Basically all they could do was go out and fuck around with unexplained things. I also used to have the exact same dream every night from 4 to 5 years old. I would be hiding in the garage under the cabinet, and the garage door was open and there were blinding lights outside, and an alien would come up to me and put out his hand. I wasn't scared after that, but that is where the dream ended. Every time. Not sure if this fits, but here we go. Couple of years ago, while driving into town to meet friends every so often on a long stretch of highway that was semi-secluded, I occasionally would find random objects obstructing my path. Most of the time I could drive past it and didn't think much of it. The last time I saw something in the road, a huge log was blocking my truck from passing, so I stopped and got out of my truck to see if I could move it. Thankfully, another car coming from the other direction also stopped and got out and helped me move it. I talked to the guy for a minute and talked to him about the random shit showing up in the roads when we both heard something in the forest nearby that spooked us both. It sounded like someone trying to imitate a wolf or wild dog howl, so we both got back into our vehicles and sped off. Thank God I wasn't alone, because not even a week later someone I knew came across the same thing in the road, and when he stopped he was all alone, and after he moved the log out of the road, a tall man in a ski mask was behind him blocking his way back to the car. The man had a strobe light that blinded him. My friend said he couldn't see what happened next, but he flipped out and booked it down the road a bit till he got to a house and banged on the door to call the police. He left his phone in the car. Turns out there is a psychopath who lives on this stretch of highway and terrorizes cars and attacks people who gets out. I even heard a story where he jumped on the hood of a young girl's car. The neighbors of this person told my buddy that they had to put up a bigger fence because he set their lawn on fire once, and the police can't do anything about it because there hasn't been any proof to lead it to him. In short, I don't use that road anymore, and this story is a strong case for why I conceal carry now. When I was 8, my dad bought a house close by my grandma's place and we shifted from city to countryside. It's a single-story detached house, erected on 1-acre land. My grandma's house was less than 5 minutes walk. To get there, we need to walk through the 1-acre land which is connected to my grandma's land. My dad planted fruit plants, cocoa, durian, etc., and we had a mini poultry farm, chickens, ducks, and turkeys. It was a simple life where everyone knows everyone. After a year without incidents, my mom started to have strange and vivid nightmares. Nightmares where she was chased by monsters/dark figures. Soon, the poultry animals were affected. One by one started to fall to the ground out of nowhere and die. Their bodies turned completely blue as if the blood has been sucked out dry. My dad and uncle, grandma's youngest son, simply assumed it's a type of disease affecting the birds. A few days later, my uncle came to our house for something and went back to his place, passing by our orchard. 5 to 10 minutes later, Dad went to the orchard to feed the birds and immediately saw close to 7 ducks lying dead right on the pathway. It was impossible for my uncle not to notice them. Soon, my uncle's family started to experience similar episodes, i.e. nightmares, birds dying. Strangely, none of our neighbors' poultry animals were affected by the strange disease. In the midst of these strange happenings, Mom went to stay at her sister's place, which is about 3 hours journey by bus, pretty near to our former house, to attend a wedding. The day after the wedding, Mom went to visit her friend. At the time of the visit, Mom's friend had a visitor. The visitor was apparently a medium with psychic abilities, whom my mom's friend invited to consult on some issues the family was facing. The moment the psychic lady set her eyes on Mom, she told my mom that someone did black magic on her and that she will die if nothing is done to remove the black magic. Mom obviously didn't believe the lady and told her, "I'm sorry, but I got no money to do a reading/consultation." To this, the lady simply replied that she needs no money and asked Mom to sit in front of her. She made a talisman for Mom as protection to wear around her neck. However, the lady said it's only a temporary remedy and Mom have to consult a more powerful psychic or shaman to remove the black magic if she wants to live. The lady reminded Mom to never ever remove the talisman from her body. Feeling bewildered, Mom came back and informed Dad and the rest of what happened. Grandma immediately contacted shaman, who also happened to be a family friend, and told him about the incidents and asked his opinion. The shaman agreed to help. He requested us to prepare some items for the ritual/prayer and that he will be coming over in 2 days. He was living in a different state. In the meantime, Mom started to get really bad rashes from wearing the talisman, to the extent that Mom wanted to take it off but kept it on due to Grandma's insistence. On the day of the ritual, the shaman together with my dad, brothers and uncle went into the orchard bringing the necessary items for the ritual/prayer. Since I was pretty young and it was past midnight, I was not allowed to follow them. Sad life. From what I heard from my brothers, the shaman said someone did black magic on Mom out of jealousy. Didn't make sense, but whatever, and it was someone who was related to us. Growing up, every summer all my cousins would come visit at my grandparents' place, where I lived and whom raised me. There was a group of us girls all the same age. About 9 to 10. And my brother, who was, during this visit, was the only boy. He was 7. We were mean and told him he could play with us and then we would run away from him. We ran into the woods behind the house. We could see him sitting on a rock, his back turned to us. We kept calling him, telling him to come to us. He turned his face to look at us and he had no face. We all stood there quiet, holding each other's hands. I remember being too scared to move. There was a trail in the woods that would lead to the main road. We ran that way and took the road back to the house. We got back to the house and my brother came running out. He was wearing a different shirt and a different hat from the boy that was sitting on the rock. We asked him if he changed. He said no. We asked him why he didn't respond to us when we were calling him in the woods behind the house. He said he was inside the entire time watching TV. Our older teenage cousin was inside and she said he was with her the entire time. That the first time we ran away from him he went crying in the house and she put on a movie for him. I often ask my cousins, we are all in our 30s now, I asked if they really did see a faceless boy or was it something our imagination came up with. They all remember the faceless boy in the purple shirt. I asked my older cousin, was my brother really inside the house with you the entire time? She is 37 now and she still says he was with her. I even ask my brother every once in a while, tell me the truth, was that you sitting on the rock? He tells me he remembers going to our older cousin crying and she told him to stay in the house. There is no explanation to this story. As I get older I wonder if I'm building it up too much. Every couple years we ask each other who still remembers the faceless boy. My grandparents always told us to be careful when we play in the woods, that sometimes the spirits will play back with us. On that note, I would like to mention all the scary shit they would tell us growing up as well. We are Cree Native American, and these are our superstitions. What my grandparents told us to keep us in line. 1. Don't knock on the walls at night or something will knock back. 2. Don't cry at night. 3. Play outside at night and an owl will pick you up and place you in its ear and fly away. 4. Mirrors in windows must always be covered at night to keep the spirits from looking at you. 5. Never look at the northern lights or whistle at them. The spirits will cone down and take you. There is more but I can't think of all of them right now. When I was at university, my friends and I used to like to dare each other to do stupid shit whilst on the way home from booze-fueled nights out. Bridge jumping, take something from a porch, etc. One night in the taxi on the way home we asked the driver to let us out at the big cemetery on the outskirts of town. There were 3 of us, my friend Louie and I had made a wager to have a running race in the cemetery and see who could get the furthest into the cemetery without chickening out. My other friend waited at the top of the cemetery gates whilst we headed inside a few meters, ready to start the race. When my friend at the gates called go, Louie and I took off running. The cemetery was almost pitch black but we were following the path. I was slightly faster and could hear his breathing and crunching of the stones under his feet behind me as we ran. After about 30 seconds or so I realized I couldn't hear him anymore, so I must be winning. Then before I could stop, I heard him gaining again, so I kept running harder. We ran out of path so I was leaping over graves and headed toward a tree line. I could hear his panting behind me. Eventually I had outpaced him again and reached the tree line in the middle of the cemetery. It was pretty silent and very dark. I turned back and faced up toward the cemetery entrance pretty puffed, trying to slow my breathing and focus my vision. I was also pretty drunk. I could faintly make out the outline of the gates which had street lights above it, illuminating my friend who was waiting, and someone was kneeling next to him. Then I heard Louie, and my other friend collectively yelling my name, Dr. Pumpenstein, come on man. What are you doing? From the gates together. That's when the hairs all over my body started to stand and I felt physically sick. I had definitely been racing Louie. For the first part. How did he get back there next to my other friend so fast? If it wasn't him behind me, then who else was chasing me? I have never run faster in my life through the darkness, adrenaline coursing through me. I was hearing movement around me but I forced it out of my mind and ran a straight line toward my friends under the lights and at the cemetery entrance. I made it to the cemetery gates absolutely gassed and both of my mates were stood there. Louie had vomited. I said, when did you stop? He said, dude, like 30 meters after we started running, when it started to get dark. I felt so sick and came back. I quickly explained I think I was chased and we hauled ass out of there. Never really sure what went down or what was chasing me, or most likely who. We still talk about that story today as friends. Apparently that cemetery is known for some cult stuff, but I doubt it was that. Never knew if it was supernatural, me being drunk, or someone actually chasing me deep into a cemetery. Either way, really spooked me. I was playing hide and seek with my siblings outside at night. My younger brother was inside counting me and my older brother were the first to get outside. There's this hole in the base of the house so my stepdad could get under there to fix the pipes and he had put a wooden pallet over it and had another piece of wood holding it there so our dogs couldn't get under there. I had my older brother help me get in there and he put everything back the way it was. I started hearing scratching noises and banging. I freaked out and started pushing on the wood to get out but it wouldn't move. I started screaming and crying and kicking the wood. No one could hear me. My dog finally came to me and she's trained to get help for me when I need it. I told her to go get Bubba, but my brothers didn't listen to her. I could see them through the cracks in the wood. The scratching got louder and I kept screaming, but they didn't hear me. I was stuck there for 30 minutes and no one believes me when I tell them what happened. I don't know what was down there with me and I really need answers. This happened yesterday and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm scared of the dark now and I panic anytime I hear scratching. My friends and I rode our bikes everywhere as kids and had managed to map out all the best shortcuts to get to and from each other's houses. There was this one nature preserve situated next to a pet cemetery, not a key part of the story but definitely adds to the creep factor. During the day the trails have constant foot traffic and as young teenagers we went off trail into the thick forest and created a hangout spot where we would have bonfires late into the night. One night, 1 a.m., while hanging around the bonfire we hear a piano. This wasn't a quiet piano, like from a speaker or keyboard, but more like a grand piano. Keep in mind we're in the middle of a thick forest situated far from any houses. Naturally we all freak out and ride out of there faster than we ever have. We later find out that other people heard the same thing and apparently there's a house somewhat within the forest that you can't see where the person likes to practice piano at night. I'm guessing that the wind/size of the piano allowed us to hear it all the way in the woods. That was a paranormal thing that we found the answer to. One unresolved one happened to me on my own and I am still rattled to this day. Same forest, late at night, 11 p.m, am riding my bike home since the bike path cuts the time in half. This bike path had no lights which made it spooky to ride alone, but in the open parts you can see the entire stretch. There was this one section however that my friends and I called the abyss. It was a short section, about 40 yards, where the tops of the trees blocked all the moonlight which was the only thing lighting the way. Before I rode through it, I pulled out my flip phone, pre-smartphone times, and turned the brightness all the day up as a makeshift flashlight. It worked for what I needed, which was to remain on the path and not hit a tree. About a third of the way through and directly to my right in the darkest part of the forest I hear a screech which was approaching me. Sounded more human than animal and considering how heavily the bushes shook it couldn't have been any of the local fauna. Quickly closing my phone I started pedaling harder than I ever have my entire life. I could have sworn I heard it coming after me, but given the circumstance the details aren't clear. I was focused on getting out of there. Thankfully the abyss was the last section of the trail and I broke out into the well-lit neighborhood that is at the trail end. I looked into the forest from the street and saw nothing. I didn't hear any subsequent screeches at that time but didn't stick around too much longer. I still have no idea what that could have been, and after that experience I never rode that path alone late at night again. Still unexplained. My entire house is a piece of shit haunted monster. It's a 7-bedroom, 5-bathroom home with a speakeasy, 2 fireplaces, an internal vac system, bells on the floor that ring maids' rooms upstairs, a serving door inside the master bedroom closet. It's an old Victorian home. Things move, cups slide across the table, stereos turn on by themselves, the alarm detector shows red lights in rooms that have nobody in them. I hate my stepdad's house. I used to run up the basement stairs as fast as I could. My friend said she saw a man in the mirror of the speakeasy. My sister comes home as a 38-year-old woman and still refuses to sleep in her bedroom. She used to get stuck in her bed and saw a black figure standing in the corner and she couldn't run or scream. She now thinks it's sleep paralysis, but my friend experienced this too. My sisters both screamed at the same time from across the house because their pans lifted off the kitchen table and simultaneously towels off the bathroom floor. When they took the wallpaper off of my walls, there was a face behind the wallpaper that was very scary looking. I don't have a description, but my stepdad said it scared the shit out of him. I snuck my boyfriend in upstairs to sleep in my other sister's room, and he said that late in the night the door opened by itself and closed by itself as though a ghost had let themselves into the room. I've seen this myself, so I know it's not bullshit. I was like, maybe you had the window open, maybe this, maybe it was a cat, maybe this or that. But no, even my mom saw it when she was going through chemo. She slept up there to have privacy and she said she felt scared upstairs. It just is what it is. Thankfully I don't live there anymore, but all of my friends, new or old, were scared of our house. My friend Elise was walking in the hallway and got stuck in the hallway and said she felt paralyzed, like she wasn't able to move. Every owner that lives there dies there. The explained parts are that John Horton of the Chicago Bridge and Iron Company built the home. He died in it. Mrs. Hill was the next homeowner. She died in the bathtub upstairs of a heart attack. My stepdad hopefully is next. He's a real piece of shit human. One time, I was playing guitar at the bottom of the stairs for some good acoustics and I heard a huge crash upstairs above me. I called the police immediately because I was home alone and my cats were next to me. They told me to get outside. Apparently someone had escaped the psych ward a mile away. There were 14 squad cars at my house. They all came out fully loaded. I was like, I have cats in there, please don't hurt them. The policeman was like, it's fine, we are trained. I'm like, WTF. I'm on the phone with my mom, she's freaking out. There was nothing upstairs but the fireplace grate fell over for no reason. Fully stable normally.